ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
I used to play with guns, knives, bows and arrows. He would play priest. Come on, Rob, let's go. No, can I give you communion? And we just tease, you're going to be the Pope. You want to be the Pope. Here we are today. Got out of grammar school, went right to the seminary. From an early stage, he wanted to be a priest. And he did. It was like, oh my God, it's Rob. It's never going to be the same. What are we going to do? Oh, yes, it's Rob. Yeah.
Quiet Riot. Welcome to this week's Quiet Riot Sunday School, the quieter, slightly more contemplative sibling to our Thursday main show. If that's the political main course, think of this as the slow simmering broth, just as nourishing, but with fewer food fights. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex. Are you saying that Sunday school has no calories?
Oh, are we the fat-free version?
I don't know. If we're a broth, then we're very low calorie.
Good. Happy Europe Day.
Happy Europe Day. You had a thing with Peter.
Yeah, Peter Kellner.
How did that go?
Really good. We had lots and lots of people tuning in and asking brilliant questions. And I think largely because the week's news has been so globally focused that people really wanted to come and hear what does it all mean for our relationship with Europe, where's that heading, and just a really lovely moment to remember that Schuman Declaration and the shared prosperity and peace that was behind the project in the first place. And boy, do we need some more of that now. So yeah, it was really good, and I'm feeling even more pro-European than usual. Now, listeners, we really hope you enjoyed the first of our three-parters on the local elections in Thursday's main show. If you haven't had a chance, go and check that out, have a listen. We kicked things off with a readout from Deputy Leader Zach Polanski about Green Party fortunes. We've got the Lib Dems and Labour lined up over the coming weeks. And then once they're all done, Alex and I will do a dedicated Sunday school to reflect on our thoughts of each three and where this leaves progressives with regards to fighting reform and the Tories. Even, who knows if the Tories are still going to be a thing in a month's time. But yeah, just to say, we are going to kind of go through all of them and then do a wrap up, sit rep, state of play, where are we, and what the hell can we do about it all?
And if you like that content and appreciate us shining a spotlight on the views of all three national parties in our space and also on the regions, we've done episodes in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, then please do help back the show. Head over to ko-fi.com/quietrightpod right now to sign up for as little as £5 a month, which gives you more behind-the-scenes content and the chance to participate in our regular editorial meetings. The next one is in a couple of weeks' time, so don't miss out on that invite and sign up today.
First up, we're going to talk all things US-UK trade, what the shape of the deal really means for UK jobs, UK consumers, and of course, the UK's deal with the EU. But also we're going to look at the detail of it, what is still to be decided, and whether any of it can actually be relied on, given Trump's tendencies to change his mind.
And then, white smoke, the Vatican has elected a new pope, a moment of enormous symbolic and, yes, geopolitical weight. The new Pontiff's priorities, tone, and global posture will shape not just the Catholic Church, a huge organization in its own right, but influence diplomacy, climate action, and rights debates in a world growing ever more polarized.
Plenty to be getting on with, Alex. Let's dive in.
Quiet Riot. Now, we keep saying that this administration is bad at comms, but there is one aspect of comms on which it is actually better than many recently: keeping things secret until it is ready to announce them. It is inconceivable that a UK-US deal would have been kept a secret until the 11th hour by any Tory Downing Street since 2010. And so, like a bolt out of the blue, on Thursday, the UK clinched the first deal with the US since Trump began his trade war, failing to reverse the flat 10% levy, but securing cuts to punitive tariffs on car and steel and aluminium exports.
A trade agreement like this between the United States and the United Kingdom was being worked on for many years, but continued to prove elusive. But because of President Trump's bold negotiating approach, he got it done. All of this happened because of President Trump's implementation of powerful tariffs to end the era of economic surrender and rebalance America's trading agreements. American workers and companies are the best in the world, and they finally have a president who has their backs, fights for them, and delivers good deals that puts them first.
The reaction from markets in the UK, the US, and Asia overnight on Thursday was largely positive, although in the UK, the hawkish decision by the Bank of England to cut interest rates by another 25 points also helped the rally. So it's difficult to know which was attributable to what. Naomi, what is the basic shape of the deal? Let's start from that.
Good question. I think the first thing listeners need to understand is that it is not a trade deal. If anything, it's a tariff deal. And being really honest, it's not yet a deal at all, because this is legally a non-binding agreement and all things to be negotiated in the future. So it does contain commitments to reduce tariffs, and the document consists mainly of a list of policy areas to be negotiated with no time or date specified for any of that and when it might be implemented. And the document states that the US and the UK are immediately beginning negotiations of the EPD to develop and formalise the proposals made in this document. So unlike the comprehensive UK-India deal that was announced earlier in this week, and I mean, I didn't think that we would probably not even be giving a nod to that on an average week, but hey, events overtake each other. The published document does not carry the legal authority or breadth of a formal free trade agreement. The document even states that the US and the UK, quote, recognise that this document does not constitute a legally binding agreement. And of course, as we know, under US law, any FTA would have required congressional approval. And once fully negotiated and agreed, it could even require UK parliamentary approval and scrutiny. So you're right to mention the items that you said above. It's a tariff deal that can reduce tariffs that have negatively impacted certain sectors of our economy. Automotive tariffs will be reduced to 10% from 27.5%. But for a quota of 100,000 UK-made vehicles. And that is about equivalent to what the UK exported entirely to the US last year anyway.
Yep.
Steel tariffs will be completely removed, down from 25% to 0%. Aluminium reduced to 0 as well. And then ethanol imports will also now be tariff-free into the UK.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but because the imposition of those high tariffs on steel, aluminium, and cars were imposed by executive order, this deal does do away with those from today, as it were, or from this week. That bit doesn't need to go to congressional approval. That's right, isn't it?
No, that's right. But the deal itself, or the publication itself, hasn't put a date or a time. It hasn't said with immediate effect or anything like that. So whether that happens immediately or not is unclear, but you're correct in terms of the constitutional impact.
Yeah, because I mean, they're basically deciding to apply those tariffs at the moment anyway, without approval from anyone, by executive order. So presumably, if the agreement between the leaders is that we will stop doing that, it has force right away. Yeah,
it could be instant. We just don't know if it will be.
What is in there that was sort of expected, as it were, and what is in there that was unexpected? Was there something in there that you thought, oh, I didn't see that coming?
Yeah. There were kind of three things, I think, that stood out on the unexpected inclusion. One is a phrase that listeners will be used to hearing me talk about in the context of the EU. And it was, as an area to be explored in future, the mutual recognition of conformity assessments. This dull sounding phrase that I always tell people is incredibly important, particularly with the UK EU deal that we're hoping to sign in a couple of weeks' time. And this is the ability to recognize that product safety, regulations around, welfare of animals, or the compliance to a certain level of production for a product has been met. So the EU and the UK agreeing that, we are agreed that one another produces to the same standard. So for us to be doing that potentially with the US as well is remarkable. I don't know that the US has many trade deals where it includes mutual recognition of conformity assessments with other countries.
Can I ask you something? Do
Sure.
you think, because when I saw that felt like a really positive thing in terms of what the government is negotiating with the EU at the moment, in that it's in their mind, they're thinking about that right now. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
There is something cultural about it that says this is the area they're looking at.
Yeah. And what we haven't had this week, among the many bloody announcements that there have been, is the publication of the UK government trade strategy. We were expecting that this week. It had been briefed that we would be getting it. It hasn't appeared. But I do know that MRC's mutual recognition of conformity assessments was a big feature that was being talked about with regards to the UK strategy as a whole, which tells me that the Department for Business and Trade, if not government more broadly, really do now get it, that you cannot reduce trade barriers in a meaningful way, non-tariff barriers, all the things that cause duplication of paperwork, of quality testing, certification to say that a product is eligible for sale in different kinds of markets. Without removing those barriers, you are not really bringing costs down for companies that export and import across borders. So I'm really enthused to hear how well they've got that message. And I'm glad, because my throat is sore, as is my entire team's, from talking to anyone and everyone about this in government, in trade bodies, banging that drum, Brussels side, this side, etc. So really, really pleased to hear that. The second area where I think there was some unexpected things in there was on ethanol. So 1.4 billion litres in tariff-free ethanol into the UK. There's been some disquiet from the farming community in the UK about that being included. And then there is 13,000 metric tons of beef that is proposed to be going in both directions. This is interesting. No one was expecting beef. Everyone was very anxious that this would be hormone beef. And I also think it's really interesting that it was in metric, not imperial. Metric tons, rather. The Americans don't tend to love that. But market access for British farmers with protections on food standards have been maintained. And the Prime Minister himself, in his press conference immediately after Trump's announcement, talked about SPS standards. So rather like the mutual recognition of conformity assessments, the language of trade deals and the big chapters that get contained in them is now in the vocabulary of the Prime Minister himself, not just those doing the nitty-gritty of negotiations.
And it is the EU language.
It is very much. And the reciprocal arrangements on beef mean that UK farmers will be given a tariff-free quota of 13,000 metric tons. US farmers will have access to the UK beef market via a tariff-free quota of 13,000 metric tons of hormone-free beef.
One of the misunderstandings initially, like I've seen a lot of people fretting online, does that mean we get hormone beef or whatever? But I mean, no, that's not the case.
Technically, no. We'll have to do checks at the border on it to make sure they're not pulling a fast one and trying to sell us crap stuff.
Sure, but I think, because the US farming industry is so gigantic, it is the case that only a very small percentage of their farmers produce organic beef, for instance, or pastured beef or grass-fed beef, and higher welfare meat of all kinds. But that small percentage, in the context of such a huge farming sector, is quite a lot, and it is a part of the farming sector in the US that is expanding very rapidly. So my read of it is that it
The
is
US might be coming up to
farmers
our
in the
standards
US.
rather.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
It is the
yeah,
US looking for
yeah,
avenues for
yeah,
that side of their farming, the organic, the higher welfare, the
yeah.
grass-fed, to expand and find more markets.
And a large beef bull weighs about 1.5 tons.
Yeah.
So we're not actually talking about huge amounts here anyway.
And what about the flip side? Like, was there something that you expected was going to be in there and wasn't? I mean, tech
Yeah,
seems there was a lot of talk that this was going to be mainly a tech agreement, and there was not that much tech in it.
exactly. Everyone was expecting that we would be told to drop our digital services tax on the US, but that 2% tax remains unchanged. It applies to companies with over 500 million in global revenue and at least 25 million pounds from UK users. And the UK and the US have agreed to pursue a digital trade deal aimed at reducing red tape for UK firms exporting digital services to the US. So again, it's maybe at some point we will potentially negotiate
We'll talk.
this, but at the moment, nothing.
Yeah. Again, something I've seen sort of a lot of people circulating stuff online that thinks we've given up that tax in return for the trade deal. I genuinely don't know based on that, presumably based on pieces that had been written ahead of time saying what they expected to be in the deal, because it's actually not in the deal.
And maybe now Musk has got lower influence on Trump, and
Maybe.
Bezos has had his fallout with him as well. Maybe that the pressure on the US side just isn't there in the way that it was. Another thing that Trump mentioned during his weird speech, with Mandelson weirdly standing behind him and
holding
Vance
hands. It was so weird.
Was that the UK was going to buy loads of Boeing planes. That was not in this publication at all. To me, that was Trump completely freelancing, trying to spin this as a bigger thing than it was. So it wasn't in the publication at all. Secondly, IAG, who own British Airways, were already ordering a lot of new Boeing aircraft anyway. And they're also buying a lot of Airbus aircraft too. Because if you remember during the pandemic, British Airways, and they've been criticised for this, let go a lot of their staff and sold off a lot of aircraft, and they're now having to recapitalise and bring a lot of that stuff back in-house. So they're doing major orders anyway. And Trump, I think, probably heard about that, wanted to take credit for it, even though he had absolutely nothing to do with it at all. And let's face it, most of these aircraft will have Derby-made Rolls-Royce engines in them anyway. So it's a boon for the UK, not the US. But whatever, if the Orange Man baby needs to get this over the line by believing in fairy tales, so be it. Quiet Riot. Today's episode is sponsored by the wonderful people at Shopify. Alex, do you recognise that sound?
I can't say that I do.
Well, it is the sound of a sale on Shopify. I've been using Shopify for years to power the Best for Britain shop, and it's got me thinking that we definitely need to use Shopify for selling Quiet Riot merch.
Oh, and we're getting there, aren't we? We're very close to getting our first Quiet Riot merchandise up and running. I've seen some early designs. It feels like everyone but me has a side hustle nowadays. I don't even have a Substack.
Exactly. And Shopify, it just sort of like takes all of the hassle out of selling things. I don't know what we'd do without it at Best for Britain, because it's an all-in-one commerce platform. You don't need to learn any tricky coding or faff around with the back end of your website. It's very much plug and play, and it just works. And it means that you can just get on with selling things quickly, easily, and cost effectively.
I mean, for a small company like us, there's only the three of us. That's me sold, because the last thing I want to be doing is trying to manage yet another process. And I like the idea that Shopify can help you get selling across other marketplaces like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, not just your own site. Because I think that actually there is the potential for our merchandise to go viral. I really feel it in my bones, especially our range of Christmas jumpers. I think they will do very, very well. Plus, I hear that, unlike us, Shopify have won awards. And with an extensive business course library, they're just there ready to support a business in every way they need.
Quite right, listeners. Shopify want to help you to get selling as well. So they've got an incredible deal. You can sign up for a £1 only trial month at shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot. That's all lowercase.
So go to shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot to take your business to the next level today. Huge thanks to today's sponsor, Shopify, and remember to sign up for a £1 trial period at shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot, all lowercase. Quiet Riot. Okay, so these are the basic kind of economic attributes of the deal, and we have a special bonus episode coming up, out on Tuesday, with expert David Hennig, that analyzes the trade aspects of the deal in some detail. Here's a little taster.
We are in a better position than we were at the start of the week, and I hope that it lasts. What I will say as well about our US handling, one, I think the UK has a lot of people within the government system who are used to dealing with the US and have worked with this relationship for a long time and are quite good at it. And I would argue that actually the UK government system is better handling the US than it is the EU. Secondly, I think that this government is finally working out what it is that it needs to do, maybe finally getting the right people in the right places to do it. And I think that bringing together the right people with the experience of handling Washington is starting to pay some dividends. I think third as well, I think an old habit that's kicked in, I've been thinking quite a lot about the UK-US relationship. There's an institutional view in the UK government that it is best to hug the US tight because we think that that's the best way to roughly keep the US on the straight and narrow, even if it's a President Trump. And that might be working. And I suspect that some wise old heads are having their moment.
Just as interesting and just as important as that detail from David around the technical aspects of trade, of course, is the politics of the deal. Alex, people who are critical of Starmer, particularly from the left, are calling it appeasement. I don't think I'm going to be surprised to hear you say that criticism is frankly ridiculous.
I don't discount that there is an intellectually coherent school of thought that says the best thing would be for the world as a whole to kind of shun America and refuse to do business with them because Donald Trump is frankly a shit and unreliable and overreaching domestically and trashing the Constitution and threatening NATO allies and things like that. So I don't think that's a ridiculous position to hold, but I do think it slightly ignores the size and importance of the US. We're not talking about sort of shunning South Africa or, during apartheid or something. There are certain aspects of the US that are so enmeshed, especially with UK security, for instance, that the idea of having a terrible relationship with the United States during Trump's presidency, that is a better option than keeping him on side. I think it's completely for the birds, I have to say.
Yeah.
And people, will cite examples like Australia and Canada, but Anthony Albanese, followed that election very, very closely, and Albanese was very careful not to criticize Trump directly. Yeah. Whenever he was asked a question about it, he would switch it to a domestic issue. Mm. And, Mark Carney was just in the White House negotiating about trade. So yeah, whatever idea, whatever romantic idea people have of, how somehow foreign leaders could lead a choir of screw you to Donald Trump, realpolitik is very, very different. Because, there's economic factors riding on it, there are jobs riding on it. And if you have to sort of pander to Donald Trump to save automotive jobs back here and, steel industry jobs back here, it's kind of your job as Prime Minister to eat crow and get it done. So my own view is that Starmer has done absolutely the right thing. I know not everyone will agree, but that's what I think. I don't know what you think.
Well, I tend to agree with you on all of that. I think my sympathy for the people that we mentioned's position comes a lot from the optics, and I had sick in my throat watching the two of them tell each other what amazing guys they were, and oh, what a wonderful deal, and then the whole Mandelson hand squeeze thing. Ugh. That does give me the ick massively, largely because I don't think they believe it, and the kind of insincerity of it just feels horribly inauthentic. But then, as you say, if that's what it takes to get this idiot to make moves that will protect very, very critical jobs in key industries in the UK, then, maybe we all just have to go along with that game and treat him like the toddler that he is by going, yes, yes, aren't you a pretty baby, clever boy, well done.
And also for the future, Naomi, like this opens a door that the UK has been trying to open for a very, very long time. And it's something you can build on when there's a different administration in the White House.
Indeed.
So I just think this was a really unique moment that will probably never be repeated, where the United States needed a deal from us more than we needed one from the United States. And I think it's been taken advantage of very, very well, actually.
I think he was jealous of the India deal that was announced as well. And I think that because of the sequencing of everything that happened with the
He rushed
US
it,
deal
didn't
being
he?
announced. He rushed it, and clearly UK Gulf were not prepared. They didn't know it was going to happen. They got completely bounced into it. And that much was true from the press pack saying, we're not in the right place and we're a 35-minute drive away. They did not know, the timing of all of this and where they were meant to be. And then you had this odd live stream on the BBC where we were watching the Prime Minister watching Donald Trump.
I know.
And it all felt very, very peculiar
on a
and not
conference
yet
call.
managed. But can I just say one other thing? What impressed me about Starmer yesterday was that he was ad-libbing. He was basically improving because of the fact that I don't think they were ready for it and they didn't know it was happening, and the White House completely bounces them into it. He didn't have notes in front of him, and he was speaking from the heart, thinking on his feet. And I think for the first time in a very, very long time, we kind of got to see Starmer unleashed. Starmer without a very tightly scripted speech written by people who have got their own political agenda, who are trying to stage manage everything. And it felt very good, very authentic. And we did hear him say things like that SPS agreement with the EU being sacrosanct and not wanting to put that at risk by doing anything that might hurt it in this US deal. I was like, oh, okay. A, he knows what he's talking about. B, he knows how to talk about it. And C, he's pulling this off with no notes in front of him whatsoever. So I thought that was absolutely fascinating and positive. Really positive.
So because that obviously is the big, big question, right? Is there anything in this somehow hamper or annoy or impact the reset that we're trying to do with the EU, do you think?
Look, the timing was announced just a week before basically the big EU UK summit that's happening on the 19th of May. So about 10 days before that, we get this US UK economic prosperity deal press conference. And it does add a layer of complexity to our trading position. Okay. It does offer a short-term win for steel, automotive, agri-food, and of course falls much short of the full trade agreement and extensive detail that, when you talk about a free trade deal, would usually contain. But I think two things. I think on the one hand, if you're on the EU side and you are more skeptical of EU-UK trade deepening, you now probably don't have quite the same argument that you did before, which was, look, they're trying to play both sides and we don't know what they're going to agree with the US. And so we really shouldn't give them anything until they've sorted that out. So in some senses, I think that the sequencing is pretty damn good because the UK negotiators can say to the EU, it's here. No way is hormone beef coming in. Nothing at all about chicken and pork. You know, there is nothing here that should worry the integrity of the single market in terms of its own standards and regulations. It's about tariffs on cars and steel, a bit of ethanol, and some high quality beef that you would be perfectly happy to consume as well. That said, I refer you back to my initial opening on all of this. We don't really know. It's the beginning of a negotiation with the US. It's a kind of statement of intent rather than, knowing exactly what's going to happen when it's going to happen. I'm saying that there is not a homogenous view within Europe, right? There are nation states and figures within the Commission who are incredibly pro deepening the relationship, and there are others that are more cautious and have deeper scar tissue from the Brexit years. But I think broadly now we can go forward into that negotiation knowing that the UK isn't going to be a rogue actor in terms of trying to have its cake and eat it from both the UK and the EU.
I think I agree. Firstly, that it is better to have something with a shape than to have the threat of something shapeless there.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a technocratic organism like the EU copes better with knowing than not knowing.
Yeah.
But I would also go a tiny step further than that. I think this will give real encouragement to the EU to be more ambitious in an EU-UK reset, because I suspect there's been a lot of the UK say they can do a deal with both. The United States doesn't do deals. And so actually to have that on the table, I think, puts a little bit of pressure to the EU to go a little bit further and faster in order to delineate the areas in which it doesn't want the UK to do a deal with the US.
Yep.
Do you see what I mean?
Totally.
So it slightly plays them off against each other, but in a gentle way.
Yeah. In an elegant way.
Yeah, and to me as a foreigner, I have to tell you, there are all kinds of mythologies of what the British character abroad is seen as. But to me, this is the most central element of the British character abroad. If I, as a foreigner, when I came here, had to ascribe one thing to British foreign policy, it's this kind of elegant manipulation.
Yeah.
In order to get results that your pure size and power would not necessarily yield.
The key thing, of course, is the no watering down on UK food standards or any change to SPS. And the National Farmers Union has welcomed it. And they said that, we appreciate the government listening to our concerns, protecting agricultural sector and securing reciprocal access for beef. And there is, of course, nothing, therefore, in the US-UK deal that would impact the ability of the UK and the EU to pursue either beneficial alignment on goods and services, all of that mutual recognition stuff, if we would both want to do so. And I think you were right earlier to say, maybe this will make the EU go, okay, well, if conformity assessments is on the table for this kind of deal, then maybe that is something we do need to look at with the UK as well.
Some analysis that I've seen, that it also has a kind of less tangible effect of putting us inside a protective bubble. What do I mean by that? Donald Trump, we know, is unreliable, changes his mind all the time. And yet, he will not want to do something that screws up the very first deal that he glorified as the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
In the very near future. He might have gone back on the deals that he did with Canada and Mexico, but he did so in his next term, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And also because he keeps on suggesting that maybe we should put tariffs on X, Y, and Z, the film industry being a recent one. I think this also kind of puts the UK inside the tent. I think it will make it marginally more difficult for him to turn around and say, I'm putting tariffs on UK film industry.
Oh, I hope so.
It certainly leaves us, a lot of people are pointing out that we're still in a worse position than we were pre-Trump. and that is absolutely fair. But we are in a better position than we were in last week.
Yeah.
And I think that is also true.
Okay, well, I want to ask you then about how opposition parties, and I notably mean the Tory party, but also Reform UK, I assume, Alex, that you will have assessed their reactions more closely than I, are incredibly jealous that it was a Labour government that managed to do the thing they told us was the biggest Brexit benefit of all.
I'm afraid Kemi Badenoch is just proving to be really bad at this stuff every time she's given an opportunity to prove that she's really bad at this stuff. Let's have a little listen to Jonathan Reynolds' reaction to what Kemi Badenoch said, because it's actually very funny.
Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch said that we have been shafted with this deal. What's your response to that?
I think if you work in Conservative Central Office and you're listening to this, take Kemi's phone off her and make her read things before she tweets. I understand other people in the Conservative Party have welcomed it, but she hasn't been able to look at the deal. I really don't believe any Conservative leader would say they don't want trade with India, she said earlier in the week. They don't want trade with the US, she's saying today. They don't like the European Union. They don't like China. I mean, who do they want to do trade and business with?
By taking this sour grapes, and I'm currently writing the episode on Aesop's fables, so it's very opposite. This sour grapes approach, it really does not work for the opposition. You just need to realize that some things are good. You need to acknowledge them and move on very quickly to your attack points, rather than acting like a sourpuss on anything the government does, especially given that, we saw a very negative, quite misrepresentative reaction from the press to the deal with India. We discussed that in the midweek episode. We've seen a broadly positive reaction to the deal with the US. Some right-wing papers are trying to hang it on Brexit. That's absolutely fine. They're saying this is a Brexit benefit. Cool. let them live out their fantasy. And it's interesting that that's the line Farage has chosen, because I think he would find it very difficult to criticize the deal without criticizing Trump, right? Without saying that Trump either took advantage of the UK or Trump doesn't know what he's doing. The very sensible position that Farage took on this was to say, and I quote here, "It is a step in the right direction. The important point is that we are doing stuff. We are making a move. It's a Brexit benefit. We were able to do this." Exactly like he did on a couple of previous occasions, he's outflanked her towards the centre, which I find really quite incredible. I mean,
it is, and she's out of kilter with her party.
She's out of kilter with the Telegraph.
Well, Andrew Griffith welcomed it as shadow business secretary. So did swathes of other Tory MPs. Surely, Alex, she cannot be long for her job.
She can't. This is
Guido leapt on that immediately, that there was no coordinated attack line on Labour, that she was off saying one thing, the rest of them were off saying something else. I mean, you can't run a party like that.
The two of us have been watching politics for a very long time, right? You develop an instinct about these things. And she seems to me to be at the stage where she has mentally checked out from the job. And it's very strange to say that so soon into her leadership. It really does feel like she's decided that she hasn't taken to the job, the party haven't taken to her, and we're now just waiting for when she gets replaced.
Yep.
There doesn't seem to be any energy, any verve, any coordination. She just doesn't seem to want it anymore.
She does not look like she is enjoying it at all.
Quiet Riot. If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Quiet Riot. Let's turn now to the smoke above Rome, metaphorical and literal. The College of Cardinals has made its choice, and the world now has a new pope, Leo XIV. being the 14th Leo means it's a pretty popular papal name, coming in behind 21 Johns, 16 Gregorys, and 15 Benedicts.
This
Leo,
is spectacularly good trivia. Bravo.
This Leo takes on the papacy with a reputation for theological conservatism, but political sharpness. His background, having spent long time in Latin America, his criticisms of secularization and his emphasis on moral clarity have already been warmly embraced by some religious conservatives, not just within the church, but across global politics. Though, as ever, Laura Loomer had a different view, I think worthy of a Wokey Dokey blessing.
Wokey Dokey!
Alex, what is it that she said of the new Holy See?
All capitals, 3 words, woke Marxist Pope. We'll get into the online MAGA reaction in a bit.
We will. His early language on restoring order and reclaiming tradition may resonate with populists, but I think we need to read between the lines. The Catholic Church has always been a complex political actor, and Leo's leadership could either amplify or quietly deflate some of the religious right's most reactionary hopes. But first, Alex, I have a very key question for you, and it is this. Which is more high camp, because genuinely, I cannot decide, the conclave and all of its pomp, or the Eurovision Song Contest? Because I was watching the news last night and watching all of this lovely outfits and the men talking about the Pope and all the smells and bells and music and Latin and Italian and Spanish, and I was just like, this is giving strong Eurovision vibes.
Yeah. I have to say, after seeing the film Conclave, with the little white umbrellas and the threading of the votes with red thread, and it is just immensely camp, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Okay, so this is my answer. They are different kinds of camp.
Okay.
Eurovision is a sort of big Saturday night club that you can take your girlfriend to as a gay man. Yeah, your straight girlfriend as a gay man, dance and have a good time.
Yeah.
The conclave is
it's
more
the order of Vauxhall, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more XXL with dark rooms, men only. So it's very camp, but it's a different kind of camp. It's a sort of men only, slightly dangerous, seedier camp.
Well, thank you. You have indeed answered my question. What do we know about Leo?
Fratelli, sorelle carissimi.
Dearest brothers and sisters,
Questo è il primo saluto del Cristo risorto.
This is the first greetings of the resurrected Christ, the good shepherd who has given up his life for God. And I should also like this greeting of peace to enter our hearts and your families, and to all those people, wherever they are, all peoples throughout the world. Peace be with you.
So interestingly, you may not remember this, but I mentioned Prevost when we were talking about the possibles.
I do remember.
Because I said that I really liked the sentence, at age 69, he may be too young for Pope. And they were talking about Prevost in that bit. And actually, he is quite young for
He's going to be
Pope
around forever.
Yeah, by recent standards. And also, I think it's significant that it was actually a very quick conclave. Either there was a lot of support behind him, or people very quickly saw that he was the obvious compromise candidate. Probably the latter, if I had to make a guess. He's a mixed bag. You have to always bear in mind that this is in the context of the Catholic Church, okay? A deeply religious, deeply conservative organization. Everything has to be put in that context. I think in that context, he's a continuation of the sort of moderate, vaguely progressive agenda that Francis had. In that he's exceptionally strong on migrant rights. In 2017, he he actually reposted a tweet that said, "I stand with the dreamers and all the people working toward an immigration system that is fair, just and moral," which is quite a thing even for a bishop back then to do. He's very strong on climate action. He sees it as a social issue, quite rightly, in my view. He has said that dominion over nature should not be tyrannical and that mistreatment of the planet is a structural sin, which I really like. He is, I would say, on the conservative side when it comes to women's participation in the church, in that he is, like Francis, against ordination of women priests. He calls it the clericalization of women. But he is very strongly in favor of higher appointments for women within the church's leadership and sort of giving a much stronger voice to women within the church's leadership. That's pretty much a score draw considering where we are at the moment, if that makes it. It takes us neither forward nor does it take us backward. Anti-LGBT.
Right.
That is something I should mention, although this is based on stuff he has said more than a decade ago, and God knows people change their minds, but he has criticized being sympathetic to beliefs and practices, and I quote again, that are at odds with the gospel, including the homosexual lifestyle and alternative families comprised of same-sex partners and their adopted children. But he's, again, to put a little mark on the opposite side, he's openly critical of criminalization of homosexuality. So, and it looks like he's, in general, and that's a general point and an important one, he's a supporter of differential approaches country by country. If there is a philosophy there, and I don't know that there is, and I don't know that he won't be adopting...
There can't be, because God is omnipresent, right?
Yeah.
So it's either, actually, while I'm bishop here in this country where they do not like the gays, then I won't fish it. But, if I'm somewhere more liberal, then hey.
Okay, but flip that. Look at it from the other point of view. It might also mean that I'm not going to delay progress in this region just because that region can't keep up. So it's all in the context of believing in God, of believing in this story of, having faith of the gospel, of the, all that sort of stuff that you and I don't understand fully and don't subscribe to. And so you have to judge it in that context. And in that context, I would say this is not as great as it could have been, but it's certainly not as bad as it could have been. It is a nod in the right direction.
I can absolutely see you as a Greek Orthodox priest. Like, you look good. You look good in the outfit.
I kind of look like a Greek Orthodox priest right now, which makes it easier, I think.
So you've done a kind of on the one hand, on the other, précis of what we know of him. What about the accusations he helped cover up abuse, or maybe didn't do as much as he could have done for survivors of abuse by the church?
Again, it's quite a difficult one. I mean, there are very strong accusations about that out there. I'm not sure which bishop could have been chosen that wouldn't have that particular black mark attached to them, to be honest.
Well, when we were doing the names and how many popes there have been, tons of them have been called innocent. And I'm not sure that that's a particularly accurate name for any of the ones in the Middle Ages, when I think most of them came along, certainly on any of this.
Yeah, the history of the Catholic Church in the last few decades is all about covering up abuse, right?
Yeah.
We have this stuff coming out all the time. And so, as I said, I think looking at that generation of people, I'm not sure there could be one that doesn't have black marks against their name. But in his case, there are quite specific allegations that he protected someone or sheltered someone that had allegations made against them. But on the flip side, there's a school of thought basically coming from the Peruvian church that this narrative is actually to besmirch him from a community called Sodalicio, which was a Peru-based Catholic group that was the one that was most accused of committing physical and sexual abuse for decades. And Francis disbanded that. And so there are a lot of people who are saying this is done by people who want to blacken his name because he went after abuse and the sects that had been most notoriously associated with it. So I don't know is the answer, but certainly, in this era of putting out a tweet with very strident opinions, I thought it was important to point out that there are also two sides to this.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
Last week, you quoted the Latin phrase "post papam grassum papa magris." So, after a fat pope, we tend to get a thin one. Has that been proved now to hold less so with this appointment?
Yeah, I think
he's a little bit more conservative, maybe, than Francis.
Tiny bit. I think he's a more conciliatory figure than Francis, possibly a better diplomat than Francis. But, he's very much an heir to Francis, I think.
Well, he only got made a cardinal by Francis a couple of years ago.
2 years ago, yeah, which is quite extraordinary. Either the conclave resisted that tendency that it has to overcorrect from the previous papacy, or there is a political message to this. There is the idea that the Catholic Church is standing up to populism, if you want, that they're not going to reverse the progress they've made to please governments that they see very much as ethereal and here today, gone tomorrow.
Well, in the scheme of the Catholic Church, what is a presidential term? I mean, drop in the ocean. Let's get back then to the religious right, the MAGA reaction, the populist rhetoric coming out of the USA on the election of the first ever North American Pope. What have they all been saying? What's your take on how they've reacted?
So the leadership has been positive. J.D. Vance posted, I'm sure millions of American Catholics and other Christians will pray for his successful work leading the church. Biden posted Habemus Papam, may God bless Pope Leo the 14th of Illinois, which I thought was really lovely.
Yeah, and Obama said that Michelle and I send our congratulations to a fellow Chicagoan, His Holiness Pope Leo the 14th. You then, of course, had the Chicago mayor welcoming it. Everything dope, including the Pope, comes from Chicago.
I love that.
That's got to be the best one, right?
No, it's got to be the best one, yeah. But it's interesting that Bannon, speaking to Piers Morgan last week, had already expressed dislike for Prevost as a candidate. He said, I do think one of the dark horses, and unfortunately one of the most progressive, is Cardinal Prevost. Basically, the MAGA crowd were happy for about 5 minutes because it was, we won. It was an American Pope. They, you could almost hear the USA. And that turned really, really bitterly and quickly. So you had alt-right conspiracy theorist Mike Chernovich, and I quote, sorry, Catholics, this new Pope is an open borders globalist. He will be pushing for abortion soon. This isn't a guess. You can scroll his X account and see what he's been up to. Then you had pro-Trump social media personality Joy Manarino that tweeted, this guy is worse than Francis, a liberal piece of shit. We're fucked.
Oh boy. And there was that dreadful MAGA influencer, Vince Langman, who said, in case you're wondering why they picked an American to be a pope for the first time in history, he's woke, never Trumper, liberal. That's why.
And Laura Loomer, of course.
Come on then, tell us what she said.
She was going all day. The one that made me laugh the most, second to woke Marxist Pope, was the new Pope once retweeted a post about how we need to keep praying for career criminal and drug addict George Floyd. The tweet said, may all hatred, violence and prejudice be eradicated. What prejudice? Is that another way to spell fentanyl overdose?
Oh my God.
I mean, it is extraordinary to take a tweet that literally just consisted of may all hatred, violence and prejudice be eradicated, and to turn it into some sort of woke.
Wow.
That sounds to me quite Christian, I have to say. I'm not an expert, but that sounds to me fairly straight down the line mainstream what Jesus said. Some of the right-wing networks were even scandalized that he didn't make his speech in English.
I would have loved for the first pope from America to say something in English.
I was a little surprised that a Chicago native did not say a few words in English.
He's talking Spanish, and he didn't even speak in English.
He spoke in Latin, Spanish, and Italian, did not speak in English.
He did not speak in English. I mean, I don't know how you claim that this is an American pope if he won't even speak in his native tongue. That to me was very disturbing.
I mean, that just says it all. Says it all.
They thought he was going to step out of the Vatican balcony and address the crowd in English. But this is kind of serious because, you know, religion is a big part of US politics.
Yeah.
Bigger part than many Western countries.
Yes.
So is this reaction likely to put off Catholic voters, do you think?
One can only hope. In the UK, I think it's about 9% of the population that are Catholic, and in the US, it's more than double that. So you've probably got about 70 million people who self-identify as Catholic. I sort of glibly said when the last Pope died, he was a disaster for those of us that don't believe in theism and organized religion and the negative impact I believe it largely has on humanity. And because he was so liberal, he was only helping to swell numbers and keep people engaged in the church. And, you know, I sort of glibly said, I really hope there's a nasty conservative and then, you know, ordinary rational people will be, you know, turned away from it in bigger numbers. But of course, it is much more important for the Pope to be liberal on the issues that we care about to do. But I think you've dug out some interesting research from the Pew Center on how Catholics split on issues in the US.
And they're almost straight down the middle, Naomi, which I think it was actually the cursed ratio, like 52-48 or something like that. And I do wonder whether in an environment where a very small number of votes decide each election, you want to have your proxies out there just shitting on God's representative on earth in such a strident, striking way. It seems to me Trump has better political antenna than that. And I think he will want the compliment and the richness of being invited to go meet the new Pope and all that. So I don't know that will become Republican position in any way. No. But it is a misstep, I think, from quite prominent MAGA people to go out and say, oh, you know...
they're all Anabaptists anyway. They're not really Catholic. Yeah.
No, I know. But from what we just said, there are like 30 million Catholic votes out there. And especially in areas like, in swing states like Illinois, they decide elections. They can. They have the capacity to decide elections.
And we know how influential the Latino vote can be now. And
I found the whole episode really very interesting in political terms, and we'll see how it shapes up. The most important issue, I think, and I get completely what you're saying about religion being, in our eyes, not necessarily a positive force in the world in general. But on things like climate change, so many developing countries are so devoutly Catholic that it really does matter. It really does matter what posture the Catholic Church takes towards climate action. If you are Philippines,
and
or if you are...
and condoms, and
absolutely,
the spread of HIV and everything. So,
absolutely.
The
so it is important.
Far-reaching.
Well, that's your lot for this week's Quiet Riot Sunday School, where we keep one eye on Westminster, one on Washington, and the third on the Vatican. If you've enjoyed the show, do your penance. Rate, review, and spread the good word. 5 stars gets you absolution. Anything else, and you may find yourself in podcast purgatory.
Blessed are the listeners, for they shall inherit the hot takes. And remember, whether it's trade deals or papal deals, if it smells like incense and power, it's probably politics. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to tune in on Tuesday for our deep dive with trade expert David Hennig. But for now, go forth, be infallible, and don't do anything we wouldn't excommunicate you for.
Peace be with you, and also with your broadband. Go woke, go Pope. We love you lots. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangita. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
And I'm Alex. What happened?
Drop my phone. Do it again.
Shambles. Alex is bound to put this on